100 years before this story began, it was a time of darkness in Transylvania. A time when Abraham Van Helsing and a small band of freedom fighters conspired to rid the world of vampires and monsters and to save mankind from the forces of eternal evil. They failed. Dracula had just awakened from a deep sleep when he heard a group of men break into his castle fortress. Van Helsing and his men struck down 3 vampires on their way in when they came upon the glowing amulet. A young girl read as fast as she could from an ancient scroll. The amulet turned into a black hole that sucked Van Helsing and his men in. They were never seen again, and the amulet was lost for 100 years. Fast forward 100 years, and a boy named Sean and his friend Patrick were sitting in the principal's office because they were drawing monster pictures during class. They were drawing the pictures to put on their clubhouse wall.
This is...
Spider with human head?
I'm sorry, spider?
With human head. Yeah, he eats dogs and cats and rabbits.
Does he?
Sean thought him up.
You see, sir, we kind of have this monster club, okay? And we draw those pictures to put on our clubhouse walls.
They walked into the schoolyard where they saw their friend Horace was being beat up by a bully. They were about to step in when an older boy named Rudy skidded in on his bike wearing a leather jacket. He made the bully eat a candy bar that he had smashed.
Hey, Rudy.
EJ? See, you met my friend Horace. You okay?
Rudy,
Shh. You dropped your candy bar, EJ.
It's his.
It's yours now.
Rudy.
Eat.
Rudy, I'm not gonna say
Eat up. And we'll call it a day.
After that, Horace wanted Sean and Patrick to let Rudy into their monster club. They all went back to their super cool clubhouse where they gave Rudy a monster test. He passed, and he was in the club.
Okay, you guys. We should let him in on one condition.
Monster test.
Come on, it's a monster test. It's important, okay? Second way to kill a vampire.
I give up. Daylight.
Sunlight.
In fact, what other kind of light is there during the day? Okay, question 2. Is Frankenstein the name of the monster or the guy who made him?
The guy.
Right. 2 ways to kill a werewolf.
Silver bullet?
And?
That's it. Shoot him with a silver bullet.
Nope, sorry, Rudy.
Okay, so what's the other way?
Sean was at home talking to his dad about going to see a movie, but his father had to go to work. He was a police officer and a crazy guy was at the police station screaming. Sean's dad had to go into work and check it out. The man was telling the officers that he needed to get locked up because he was a werewolf, and there would be a full moon that night. He was slammed on the table by 2 officers, but he caught a glimpse of the moon, and he had a burst of strength, and tossed the officers off of him like rag dolls. He manhandled 4 more officers with his super strength until an officer drew his weapon and fired 3 times, taking the man out. On the way to the cemetery, the full moon was in full effect, and the once dead man was awakened and transformed in the light of the moon into a werewolf. He broke out of the van and ran into the woods. Across town, Sean's dad was at a museum where a 2,000-year-old mummy was missing. No one had broken in, but the body was missing.
So let me get this straight. You telling me there was this 2,000-year-old mummy here, right?
Yes, sir.
But now he's not here. He's gone. Vanished. History. And you're saying you didn't hear anybody come in here or leave. Is that right? Can you hear me now? Hello?
I can hear you fine.
So nobody took the mummy.
I would have heard them.
Did you take him?
No, sir.
Just a shot. That's it, Bill. This case is too hard, man. Let's be firemen instead.
I'm glad you're getting major laughs out of this, Rich. The problem is, 2,000-year-old dead guys do not get up and walk away by themselves.
This was the second unexplainable thing that happened that night. And soon it all made sense. A few miles away, Dracula appeared on the shore of a lake. He had a red and black cape and red eyes. Around him gathered the werewolf and the mummy. He pointed to the water and soon bubbles erupted from the bottom and a large sea creature emerged from the water and threw a large box onto the shore. Dracula hugged the box and tore the lid off. It was Frankenstein. Dracula used his cane to wake him up. Dracula had a werewolf, a mummy, a sea creature, and now Frankenstein. Dracula needed to sleep as daylight was coming soon. He told Frankenstein to find a boy named Sean and take Van Helsing's 100-year-old diary from them. Sean had the diary, but it was written in German. They had an idea to visit a scary German guy who lived on their street. He read the diary and it told them exactly what was happening and how to get rid of all the forces of evil by performing a ceremony with the amulet. The ceremony had to take place every 100 years, and the diary's last entry was 100 years ago. They had 1 day to prepare for an epic battle against evil. If they failed, the world would come to an end.
Once every 100 years, at the stroke of midnight, the amulet becomes vulnerable, and at that moment it can be shattered.
And if it is?
Then the balance between good and evil will shift, and evil will rule. However, our friend Mr. Van Helsing claims there is a way to stop the forces of darkness.
How?
If one could gain possession of the amulet before those forces, then every 100 years at midnight, there is another option. A ceremony which, when followed to the letter, will open a hole into limbo itself, where dwell the damned. A vortex which, like a great whirlwind, can swallow the forces of evil forever.
They went back to the clubhouse to make some plans when out of the shadows Frankenstein appeared. He was 8 feet tall and towered over them. They all ran away and hid. It wasn't until Sean's little sister came out and showed them he was a good guy. Frankenstein wanted to help the boys and they got to work. Rudy made sharp wooden sticks and silver bullets. Sean looked at a map to find the old house on Shadowbrook Road where the amulet was. A young boy wrote a letter to the army, and Patrick asked his sister if she could read the diary and open the portal when they had the amulet. They were ready. But when the time came to enter the very old mansion, Horace was scared and tried to talk Sean out of it. Sean looked at Horace and told him that the world would end if they didn't do this.
Time's running out. Sean, no! Scary house, real monsters, us, 12 years old, remember? Midnight, in the world, remember?
They entered the creepy old house and immediately an explosion went off that crumbled part of the house and Frankenstein was knocked out. Then down one hallway, the kids shined a light and saw the werewolf. Down another hallway, 3 female vampires, and another hallway, they saw Dracula himself. They were trapped. The werewolf jumped at them, but Horace kicked them between the legs, and they flipped a secret switch on a statue and they fell through the floor into a secret room.
Kick him in the north! Kick him in the north! He doesn't have north! Do it! Do it! Wolfman's got north!
In front of them, they found the amulet. It was glowing green and Sean walked to it slowly. He picked it up and the kids ran out of the house. They met up with the scary German guy, Patrick and Rudy. They got in the car and headed for the middle of town. On the way, the mummy jumped onto the car and was climbing up the back to get them. Rudy grabbed a piece of the mummy's wrap and tied it to an arrow. He shot the arrow into a tree, and the mummy started to unravel. The arrow held, and soon the mummy was just a skeleton on the side of the road. They finally made it to the town square, and it was only 20 minutes to midnight. They stood in the middle of the street, and Patrick's sister started reading, but she was nervous and not getting any of the words right. Just then, 3 female vampires walked slowly down the street, but Rudy used the wooden stakes he made to take them out. Overhead, Dracula flew in, but Sean's dad came in firing, and Dracula crashed into a window in a nearby building. Sean's dad went upstairs to finish Dracula off when he ran into the werewolf. The werewolf grabbed Sean's dad and threw him into a bunch of boxes. He picked him up overhead and threw him across the room. Sean's dad was down, but Sean called Werewolf's name and then hit him with a baseball bat. Sean's dad got up and pushed a bomb down the werewolf's pants and pushed him out the window. He exploded into a million pieces. Dracula had enough. He marched down the street and took out 20 police officers. He walked right up to Sean's sister, who was reading the diary now, and he picked her up and demanded the amulet from her. She was scared, and Dracula showed his teeth. He was about to grab the amulet when Frankenstein picked him up off his feet and kicked him across the street onto a fence. He saved her life. The amulet started glowing and rumbling. The ceremony had been completed and the scary German guy threw the amulet into the air and a wind tunnel appeared. It started pulling and all the bad guys and everyone else hid behind cars and benches. Dracula grabbed Sean and was dragging him into the portal, but Sean grabbed a wooden stake and drove it into the tummy of Dracula. Just then an old man grabbed Dracula and pulled him into the portal. It was Van Helsing. He had waited for 100 years to come back to finish the job. Sean and his friends watched as Dracula was pulled into the portal before it closed forever. It was over. Suddenly, a bunch of army men and tanks came rolling into town. The general had the letter that the little boy had written, and he was asking who was in charge. Sean said that he was in charge. The army general asked who he was. Sean handed him the business card that said they were the Monster Squad.
Can somebody tell me what's going on around here?
Well, we can't, sir.
Who are you?
We're the Monster Squad.
The end.